then we visited Carl Sandburg's home, who was a poet and folk singer, and his wife raised goats.
He made Kentucky Fried Chicken.
So anyway, that's what we did. Okay, so now let's begin. And today we're beginning History of Civ 2, and this is going to pick up where we left off, looking at the material as it begins with the modern age. Not exactly 1650 or so, but that's a good cutoff for this course. It might push it in closer to 1700. And so if you haven't taken the first half, you can do that later and wonder how we got here all semester long.
Sounds good.
So that won't be fine. So anyway, we'll have prayer as we begin, and look forward to important semester and enjoying what we will be learning here together. So let's pray. Father, pray for you. We pray that your Spirit would be with us and help us in this class to study together and learn about the history of the world in the modern age, right up until the 20th century, and 21st century, and we pray that you will guide our understanding in this, helping us to know and see your hand in the flow of historical events and how your church and your people have impacted things. We pray that you will help us to be good citizens of this world as we plan to live our lives and create history ourselves. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so your syllabus is in Populi, and you can download that. We're going to go through that and talk about the different things that we will be doing this semester, and then explaining how the course will work. We will plan our old reports that we'll be doing and seeing how they are done. And then we'll get into the very first lesson that we're talking about. Oh, by the way, if anyone's interested, this is Horseshoe Bend National Battlefield in Alabama. It was a War of 1812 battlefield. And the stockade where the Cherokee Indians lived, and at that time was down here. This white fence is where the stockade would have been. And they were allies of the British anyway, and we attacked down this hill towards them. But it's in Alabama if anyone's interested in visiting it. But I may pull out some of my slides. I've just gotten the full set of all the slides from my dad's collection digitized, so I can maybe show you pictures of trips when I was a boy. So we'll see how that all works. So anyway, today this course is a study of the history of civilization, focusing on religious, political, legal aspects of the modern world from 1650 to the present day from a Christian perspective. Now, in the very first lesson that I give in my first lecture, in the first part, I deal with what I mean by that. I don't necessarily mean anything special about Christianity, but history is important because as Christians, we recognize that time is linear and events happen only once. And our lives are important because what we do makes a difference in the world, because you're only going to do it once. We have an impact. We may not be remembered. You know, this book that you study, and we'll get into a little bit about exactly the format of that, but the study is is full of lots of information, but there are many people who don't make it into the book, and most likely we won't. But all the people who have lived and died and have attributed to life. We know that they're here and made a difference. Do you know why? Because we exist. There's all kinds of people who you'll never know who lived and died and had families and so forth, and thankfully, we're here as a result of that. And so ordinary lives do make a difference. Every now and then someone does something that is remembered beyond them. Now this book, Civilization Past and Present, 13th edition, is an electronic book. I think you can get hard copies, but and this rental book is for 120 days, which means that if it starts, if the rental were to start last week, I talked with Mrs. Semero. She was mentioning that it would expire because this semester is as long as it is. It would expire before finals week. So they will, I believe, open that the rental is purchased to start tomorrow. That will get you through to the 17th of May, which is during finals week. I do have my hard copy, my actual printed book. By the way, I didn't even know such a thing existed. But anyway, my printed book is in the library. You can use it in the library until your book's open and so forth. And I'll have it there for a couple of days, but I'll be needing it back. Same thing goes at the end of the semester. I'll still have it there for you to look at if your final is after your book disappears. Because that could happen.
Where do we go to get that digital book?
Adele is going, and I don't know really the process of how, but I think she will tell the publisher who is in the course, and they will send you an email link from Pearson Education that will tell you how to access it. You can access it on your computer or through the app on your phone.
Okay. And there's no way to get a physical copy?
You can, but it's fairly expensive.
Okay.
This, now, technically speaking, if you want to become my prize student and you want to read this book, every day for the rest of your life, I will say that if you want a hard copy and you want to use it, it's worth buying because what you pay to rent it 2 semesters is almost as much as it would cost you to buy a hard copy you can then have. Anyway, there is a degree of economics there. They're trying to make more money by having you rent the book over and over again. Yeah, for shame. And I also believe that they are doing this because it's easier to edit the book into a new edition if they don't have to deal with lots and lots of paper copies. So it is possible. And so I assume that that's what will happen, that it will come tomorrow. Now, of course, Adele might be otherwise engaged with activity and things going on, so I'm not sure how that will all work. Now, by the way, you will see in Populi that there are terms, reviews that you're to be working on. Be aware that when you look at the schedule, the first exam is on February 10th. And just as before, as long as you have the ones for the first unit ready by the 9th, they count. So if you don't get the first one done tomorrow or the next day, for it to be turned in on the 18th, that's not going to hurt you based on when the book arrives. But I didn't really anticipate this. The fall semester, you may not, is not 120 days long, so we didn't have this problem. And that's because of spring break, which is longer, and there's a few other things that go on that make this semester longer than the fall. So,
How long is this semester?
I don't know, but it's over 120 days, I can tell you that much. I wouldn't know that if I didn't have this book problem. So, here are the objectives. To demonstrate knowledge of God's hand in the flow of historical events, display a working knowledge of the times in the history of civilization, identify the major figures in human civilization and their contribution to the development of world history, demonstrate the importance of the church to the history of civilization, understanding the factors of the rise of Western dominance of the world, state the factors that cause decline in Western civilization, and understand the place of the United States in the modern world. Looking at the requirements, carefully read the textbook as assigned and complete the open book online quizzes as on study terms. Quizzes will be completed before the day tested for each unit. So late quizzes won't be accepted, but by that I mean after the test for which they are, the unit that they're a part of, I won't take them. And as we get closer to the due date, you will probably see, if you haven't completed them yet, zeros popping up in your Populi grade book that shows that they haven't been completed yet. They will, by doing the quiz, if it's still open, Populi will override that. But it has been my practice to do something along that line so that the zeros don't pop up after you can't do anything about it.
124 days.
Oh, I'm glad to know that you want to know the length of semesters. Here's the person who can help you out with that one. Each student can be aware that these quizzes are to be done online. You are to, you can use your book, and I want you to. Don't try and do them without looking at the text. The goal is to figure out what the information is. Each student will give a verbal report on with an accompanying illustrated PowerPoint presentation, and these reports will be given in class. Now, once again, we will pass this little envelope around and select the number out of this envelope, and then you can tell me, yes?
Is there a rubric for these presentations that we should be aware of before we?
Yes, it is, and it's written right here in the syllabus.
That's good. I might want to read that.
You might. Would you like to explain why it's important to read the rubric?
Last time I didn't do it. I gotta see.
And
Because I forgot to put something in my assignment source.
yes. Okay, so now.
Did we say our numbers?
Yes, okay, Taylor, would you?
I'm number 24.
24.
23.
It's the chapters.
22.
No.
33.
Okay. 26.
26. Levi? 25. Right, this is your chapter title, except for Jared. There is no chapter 33, but we still will be having modern history. So modern times.
Does Jared want chapter 29? It's in here.
I suppose I can trade with him. Do you want to take 29?
Sure.
People who are in the news now, so now this is what you do. You can go look at the book that's sitting in the library, open up to your chapter, peruse through it, or once your book opens tomorrow, hopefully, find the person who is of interest to you from your chapter and decide that you want to report on that person. Now, when you report on this, this is how you will, a historical figure will be selected from the text. And let's see here to make sure. Is the 30th, the class day. Historical figure will be selected from the text and reported through Populi on January 30th or before. And what you do is you go in, you find the assignment that says or report person, you type in I have chapter 30, 29, or whatever, and I'm going to report on this person. Each of you need to have a unique person, but if you get yours in on time and I respond back to you, oh, by the way, that person was already taken because they're in more than one chapter, you won't be late by having to redo it. But I do want these so that I know there's someone you're working on as we begin. These will be done on the day the reading for your chapter is due, for the most part. But I will put a notice in the calendar of this course that will tell you when to expect to be ready. And so if the person who has chapter 21, February 15th, that's the first one. And that will be the first one, 22. February 20th. So those days, you can be pretty well expecting that when you know when your report will be. So start looking for your individual and decide who you want to report on. They should be 5 to 10 minutes in length, presented orally in class, expanding on the life of the person studied, including their year of birth and death. Of course, depending in modern history, you might report on someone who's still alive. Significant contribution to world history and other relevant information. You may include your own perspective on their impact to world history. Reports are to be organized and well-researched, containing materials from at least 3 sources besides Civilization, Past and Present, or Wikipedia. So you can use them. You can use your textbook, and obviously that person will be in there. And you can use Wikipedia as a guide, but those 2 sources don't count. You need to submit a bibliography that contains all the sources used. And you can bring this as a hard copy or attach it to your PowerPoint, sometimes on the last slide. And that should be sent to me so that I can have it. Part of your test preparation will be reviewing the oral reports that are given in that unit, and I will post these PowerPoints in the lesson. Right now, there is only one, but in the lesson that says oral report videos or PowerPoint. So those PowerPoints will be in there in the order in which which they were given for you to review. Be aware that I have no problem with you using websites, but internet websites will only be accepted as part of the bibliography without at least one non-reference book in addition to the text. So please remember to do that. And if you have a problem finding material on your person, be aware that many people will not be, you won't find their name in the card catalog. But you may need to look through books and their indexes, and if all else fails, you can come ask me to help you look for things. In the event that diligent searching is done and it is decided that this person is worth reporting on, obviously, they're in the book, but they're not, we don't have any information on the library and it's not possible to get anything. I can exempt you from this requirement, but I want to help you do research in addition to just Googling their name. So that is helpful. Students should prepare an accompanying illustrated PowerPoint to be used, attach that as a file to Populi, or send it to my email before the day that you present. And grades for the reports include your preparedness. If you have notes or any other information, work that you've done that you can turn in, that will be helpful in getting your grade. The quality of the presentation and the use of a visual aid. Be looking for something that you can bring to class to help illustrate your person. And that can be something that you have, an object, or something that you've made. And I've had some rather unique ones. There was one person who, Ian Green, everyone knows who he is. He was doing Karl Marx, and he was a member of some beer hall club. And I'm hoping it was LA, but I can't be sure. He had this flask of some kind of liquid that he decided to illustrate how he would have behaved in his overvise. And that was unique. So maybe don't do that. But anyway, do something that helps with a visual aid in the presentation. And then you can see here how your grade will be derived for this report. Most substantial credit is given on the material that you present, but also on your bibliography, turning the report in, your topic in on time, your visual aid, the PowerPoint presentation, and then how prepared you are. So all of that works together. There will also be 4 videos that you'll watch, and there are video review guides that we have in the library. One on the Industrial Revolution, one on World War I, one on decolonization, and the other on the impact of the World War II generation on American life and the GIs. All of these are available with links, and I've checked them, they all work. We also do have either DVDs or videos, and videos is a VHS. It's like a rectangular piece of plastic, and it opens up and there's like film in there. And if you go to the Henry Ford Center Museum, they have on display this thing that you stick it in and it plays movies. Now, yes, so some of these we might be able to convert to a DVD ourselves, but they're not available in that format. And I'm glad to know that they're available online anyway. But watching those, you can answer the questions on Populi. There are hard copies in here so you can see the questions, and reviewing those, and then also being prepared that each test will also have a section where we're going over the answers on those videos. So you can start on that as early as you want. Then there'll be 4 tests. No comprehensive final exam. So the last unit will cover just that, and every other unit will be the same. Attendance. Be here on time, and absences must be excused by the dean within 2 weeks of the absence for it to be counted as an excused absence in class. Use your laptop for class material and so forth. Now, Zooming, obviously you understand that if you're not in class and you Zoom in, that should be pre-approved by the academic dean. And there really isn't any issue here with paper writing, but if you do write papers for all of my classes, this is a standard thing that paper should be typed double-spaced in 12-point Times New Roman font, and footnotes should be in 10-point. And if it's not that, I have been known to kick it back to students and ask them to redo it. And then it's late. That gives a nice presentation, and it's fair then as far as presentation for everyone. Okay, now, do we have any questions about what we're going to be doing this semester? And the way things are going, we'll be getting through American history. Who knows who will be president by the time we get to May. So Africa. This is our first unit, and this material, as we look through here, obviously, I'm going to open up the first unit. Then you can look at your text when it arrives. But the material on the Americas and the Europeans. One of the things that this book has done in its revision, the 13th edition from the 12th. The 12th edition had 36 chapters. This one only has 12. And the number of pages, I think, is less. What they've done is they have edited and reorganized and condensed a lot of the material on Western history. So that material is not as extensive as it was in the 36-chapter book. Some things were in more than one, just in different places, and I think they've tried to eliminate that too. And I don't know that they have added anything in non-Western history, Africa or the like, but that material does take up a greater percentage of the book now, because Western history and its footprint is less. But a lot of the material from the old editions that I've reorganized my PowerPoints, I'm including a lot of that material anyway. So we'll still see that. And so these units here on America and European century are extensive. So I may go through these first 2 chapters fairly quickly, but we'll get through that fast. Let me do something here that I failed to. Okay, so Africa and world history. Now, when we are looking at the African slave trade, this picture is a photograph from, and I think it is in French, actually. But this was a model that was done, that was made by William Wilberforce and his group when they toured Europe to give the basic understanding of what the cargo hold, if you want to call it that, was like for the human cargo that was being transported, and how closely they were chained fast. This is the upper deck. That's below. And there may have been more than one level like this. Just chained fast, that there was no room to move inside. Now, with the Atlantic slave trade, this will begin in 1441, when the Portuguese will kidnap several Africans in what would become their colony of Angola, and then also Mozambique. The Dutch West India Company would take over the trade of slaves by the 1640s. And I found it very interesting with all of the talk of reparations, and there's certainly, I think, there's certainly a lot of devastation here. But the African slave trade would never have been possible if it wasn't for the fact that this was, there were willing and active participants in the slave trade who were Africans themselves. Many African rulers profited substantially from the slave trade, in some cases by selling off their own people who they did not want. They had surplus people, they could sell them, or to go on wars and capture people from weaker tribes who they would sell to the European, what became known as factories, where human cargo was processed. And the European slave traders never went very far into the interior. So those Africans from interior areas that were brought out to be sold, there was definitely African cooperation there. Queen Nija dealt substantially with the Portuguese, and was also was able to keep her domains in the area that we now know as Angola by storing Africans in factories in preparation for their transportation across to the New World, known as the Middle Passage. And there would have been slaving all through the New World. So all of the colonies, maybe not up into Canada much, but all through the American colonies, there was slavery in the early days. It wasn't very profitable in places like Massachusetts. And very little, although some, which I find intriguing, in the South, industrial slavery, that is, slaves working in factories. If the North had industrialized in the 1820s and 30s, if like the Industrial Revolution that really kicked in after the Civil War had been already in force, there would have been a much greater incentive to have industrialized slavery in the North. Factories because basically, if you look at a lot of the ways that factories were run with company towns and company stores, you had to live in the town to work in the factory, and you were not paid money, but you were paid scrip that you would get your food and material from the company store. There definitely would have been slavery in the North, but it wasn't profitable as it was on the plantations in the South. The beginning of the end of the slave trade would not occur until the 19th century, the 1800s. Denmark was the first nation to end the slave trade. Then the British, very important, 1807, will end the slave trade. And America will stop the importation of slaves with our constitutional government in 1820. So after that, there was no more importation of slaves. You could have slaves that were already here, but not any more imported. So where slavery really will kick in is in Portuguese areas, Spanish colonies as well, and most of the slave trade will come to Brazil in a sort of the major triangular trade slaves to Brazil, from Brazil bringing up molasses and sugar from the sugar plantations up to New England, where they would make rum, and then send that back to Africa to use to buy slaves. So that would be the way the slave trade will continue to work. It is believed that as many as 12 million people were lost to Africa through the slave trade. That is the number of people who left. That is an estimate. But there are far more people of African descent in America or South America, Brazil, whatever, than 12 million. And many of them may have died on the way because of reproduction here in America, in the New World. But the only place where slavery was able to survive without importation of slaves was in the United States. And I think it's because, for one, living conditions and the presence of substantial numbers of female slaves allowed that to occur. That was not the case in South America, where the vast majority of the slaves were men, and you can't reproduce without female slaves, families, and so forth. And the living conditions and the working conditions were a lot harder, and they were worked to death more on the sugar plantations in gangs, and they just were not, it wasn't profitable to have family life and raising human beings as workers. It was better just to go bring in fully grown adults across. So this is the situation that develops, and it is a terrible blot on human history that this did occur, and it was very much an industrialized process. But it were Christian people who did an end to this. One of the more important of these is this gentleman here, John Newton. He was a British slave trader and well known for being an infidel, just a terrible, wicked man. And he was dramatically converted and quit slaving. And you have to, one of the big issues, especially that William Wilberforce will face and others in eliminating the slave trade, is that in England there was lots of concern that if we eliminated the slave trade, basically it was a major source of not just of revenue and money, but it was also a substantial footprint of the British naval presence and business presence and the presence of their international economic presentation around the world. And what would happen is, it's not like if they do this, everyone's going to say, oh, you're such a nice, you're so humanitarian, you're so wonderful. No, the French, the Spanish, the Dutch, someone would take over that. And it would be fearful that doing that and allowing that would expand the influence of enemy naval power or economic power. So there's lots of things to consider. This here is the grave of Newton. And if you have seen the movie Amazing Grace and the older gentleman that Dr. William Wilberforce goes to see, Newton was certainly that. And he does write many hymns. Amazing Grace is one. He doesn't. The tune we sing to it is not original. In that whole song, where they're all sitting around singing that song to that tune, it's like, no! That is an American slave, or at least it is believed to be an African American medley or song that was popularized in the South. It had nothing whatsoever to do. It just happens to fit the meter of that song, and it's in America where it becomes popular because it was originally written as a watch night hymn to be sung on New Year's Eve to welcome in the new year. And all of the references to pronouns in that hymn were originally plural. Like we, the congregation, who has seen God working in our lives up to this point, we anticipate that He is going to extend us grace into the next year. So it's a rather interesting history, that song, and how it was Billy Graham who reintroduced that song to England during his crusades in the 1950s. Almost forgotten in Britain. But anyway, very important history there.
Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. One of the most recognizable hymns of all time is Amazing Grace. Whether Christian or not, you've heard this sung, whether in movies or in movie. But the gravity of its words can't be fully known unless you know the testimony of the dangers, toils, and snares that brought these lyrics about. John Newton was born on July 24, 1725. His mother died at 6, and he had this to say of his father. I am persuaded that he loved me, but he seemed not willing that I should know him. I was with him in a state of fear and bondage. His sternness broke my spirit. Left to his own devices, Newton became a debauched sailor himself. He was pressed into naval service against his will at the age of 18, living a destitute existence as part of the slave trade.
Let me just mention here that it says that he was impressed into naval service against his will. It was not uncommon for the British government to kidnap people and force them to serve on ships, whether it was the slave ships or in the Navy. And that was one of the reasons why the War of 1812 was fought, was because they were doing that to our citizens, forcing them to serve in the British Navy. It's amazing that you could even do that, but that was very common.
He was not much more than a slave himself. He was treated terribly, and later wrote that the African slaves would often smuggle food to him. It was in this dark hour that God began to close in on him, a man who wasn't looking for him at all. On March 21st, 1748, Newton, then 22 years old, awoke to a violent storm. His room began to flood with seawater, and he rushed towards the deck. On his way, the captain stopped him and sent him to get a knife. The man who took his place on the deck was instantly washed overboard. Newton was assigned to the pumps in an effort to keep the boat from sinking. From 3 a.m. until midnight the next day, he worked the pumps and took shifts at the helm. While on the pumps, he uttered a desperate prayer. If this will not do, the Lord have mercy on us. It was his first petition to God in many years. The boat lived for safe dock in Ireland, and while doing so, Newton read a Bible he found. In his heart, he felt like an irreconcilable sinner, but Jesus' words gave him hope. The date would be one he would never forget. The experience marked a huge turning point for him. However, his life did not instantly change. In fact, he was the captain of a slave trading ship for several years after the event, and it wasn't until later in life that he would strongly oppose the slave trade. Newton wrote of his experience then. I acknowledge the Lord's mercy in pardoning what was past, but to pay depending chiefly on my own resolution to do better for the time to come. I cannot consider myself to have been a believer in the full sense of the word until a considerable time afterwards. He eventually married, and in 1764 he felt called to become a pastor. Over the next 42 years, he tirelessly shepherded 2 churches. It was during this time that he started a prayer service with William Cooper and started writing hymns collaboratively and on his own. And with totaling 300 hymns to his name, he averaged 1 a week. He was instrumental in encouraging his friend and ally William Wilberforce to stay in British Parliament and fight for the abolition of slavery. Wilberforce was the major force in bringing about the end of the slave trade in Britain. Encouraged by Newton, Wilberforce fought for the abolition of the slave trade for almost 46 years, facing mountains of opposition. But through it all, he faced this conflict with the same spirit that led Newton, and in doing so, made even his opponents admire and respect him. John Newton's life was not a sprint, but a marathon, filled with hurdles, strife, and adversity. But all of this only served to embolden Newton's faith, and to cause him to rely more and more on the grace he had first received in the middle of a violent storm at sea, so that one day he could write the words to a hymn that would touch the lives of countless people.
Now, to last end this idea of the ending of the slave trade is this country here and its founding in Africa, Liberia. Now, the colony of Liberia, and then also what is north here, Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is right up here. Both of these colonies were founded as havens for slaves, or by anti-slavery societies. And if you take my course on history of missions, you will learn more about the founding of Sierra Leone, because it is fantastic in its history. But Sierra Leone, north of, this is Liberia, but Sierra Leone is up there, was established by Britain for freed slaves, and its Creole population, which is a mixed race population of blacks and whites that lived there, and became an alternative to slavery. Now, it was never really that successful as really an indigenous church governmental operation. But the British government did actually, after they eliminated the slave trade, they actively policed slaving. They found slaves from any country. They would take the ships and let their human cargo go free in Sierra Leone. Now, that was a problem because they didn't take them back home where they came from. They put them there, and that created new problems. But nonetheless, they were not leaving Africa. Another is Liberia, which was founded by the United States, or not the United States, but Americans. It was never an American colony, but more of an American protectorate. So some maps will show Liberia as an American possession, but it never was. But it did have its independence because America saw to it that it was free. So American protectorate, maybe. It was founded by an organization called the American Colonization Society that established the United States abolishing the slave trade in 1807, 20 years after the Constitution was ratified. And so what they did was, there was a great sense that integration was not a good thing. Even President Lincoln was not sure integration was a good idea. He wrote in one letter, that to Frederick Douglass, that having an integrated society is not a good idea. If the African slaves weren't here, we wouldn't be having this war killing each other. So it may be better if the African slaves are freed and taken somewhere else. Panama was thought of an idea, Cuba, or some other island in the Caribbean. But this idea gained a lot of traction in that Liberia was founded as a homeland for freed American slaves who wanted to return home. And it was founded in the 1820s while James Monroe was president. And that's why their capital is called Monrovia. Monrovia, after President Monroe, who was not necessarily a member of this, but supported the idea. And I think it's a great idea. People are not racist, but people were, if they didn't come here of their own free will, maybe it's a good idea to send them home if they're free. Because here in America, there's a lot of race prejudice or whatever the case may be, and they just might be happier home. And that may be a good idea, but once again, they sent them here, and there were already natives living here. And so Liberia has been a mess. And most of the people there have names like, Johnson and other names that clearly are English surnames that they acquired in America and then were sent there. And they have dominated and oppressed the local population. So it's been a very unstable situation. But nonetheless, I think it was a worthy goal. Sending them back if they wish to go, not against their will, but if they wish to go, they would provide them transportation. Okay, we'll see you Wednesday.
Stop throwing chairs, Taylor.
Thank you.
Dr. Reed's gonna be a good class.